Hello and welcome to Education Talk. Now, this is one of your best programs on education on television. You're very welcome, and I'm Wilma. One of the things we do on this program is to bring solutions to challenges faced by parents, head teachers, students and policymakers. And today we will be concentrating on the parent. Now, if you are a parent considering private education for your child, the Independent School Show is a must attend, and the London show takes place on the weekend of the 8th and the 9th of November 2014. And this year will be the largest show ever, with over 200 of the finest and the best schools from nurseries to secondary school.
Obviously, there's a kind of lot of things to think about in terms of, like boarding schools and schools outside of London and those kind of debates as well. So just to get more information.
Probably the most helpful thing I'll talk about is the timing of the process. What should you be doing at what stage, depending on how old your children are.
We have been to a couple of talks which we found very useful about whether or not to have a tutor.
We didn't make it down all the schools because there was just so many. We had an A, a B and a C list, and we really only got through all the A's and a couple of the B's because there was just so many.
You'll probably be back again next year, won't you?
Most likely.
For nearly 30 years, writers from the Good Schools Guide have visited and reviewed schools all over the UK. We have the editor of the Good Schools Guide in our studio today, a very prominent figure, Beth Noakes. Beth, you're very welcome to our studios.
Thank you.
And next is Dr. Christy Marfidan, a very well-known guest on this program, who is a consultant to presidents and monarchs. Dr. Christy, you're very welcome to our studios.
Thanks for your kind invitation.
Now, Beth, let's start with you. You're the editor of the Good Schools Guide. Now, why should parents listen to you?
We're probably the only independent guide in the country. Schools can't pay to be in it. We go and visit them because we think they're good. We talk to teachers, we talk to heads, we talk to parents and pupils, and we make up our own mind and write about them. So nobody's paying to be in, it's entirely our own views, and that's why parents should trust us.
Because it's entirely what you see. Schools don't pay to be in it, so exactly what the picture is what the parents are having.
Yes.
You're going to be at the Independent School Show tomorrow. Tell us what you'll be doing there and the advice you'll be giving to parents.
Okay, we will be at the show because a lot of our target audience will be there too. It'll be parents who are wondering what school to send their child to. And what we tend to say to people there is we're the only people not trying to sell you anything. And what usually happens is parents come to us when they're getting very confused and say, help, this is what I'm looking for, this is what my child is like. Where do you think I should look? How should I go about it? And so we have various of our writers there and advisors, and we spend a lot of time talking to people, to parents about schools.
I was just about to say, what do you say, Dr. Chris? One of the things Beth has mentioned here is a lot of parents seem lost when it comes to the education of their children. They don't even know when their kids are writing SAT exams or tests, or when the kids are meant to do some certain things that are expected of them.
That's right. It's always very useful to get an independent voice, because the school, once the school opens, they are all run down with all sorts of bureaucracies. We have one inspection after the other. So parent engagement is the least on their priorities. So you need somebody that has a clear mind, a lot of independent information, and is always updating. That's one useful thing I find about the school guides. The information are never dated. Once there are any changes, you come up with a new edition, and that's quite useful for anyone that is seriously considering the alternatives. You want to see option 1, option 2, option 3. You want to have a backup plan when it comes to school applications. So that's quite something that I found extremely useful as a parent. I did consult the independent school guide. The Go School Guide when I was making a decision for my children.
Oh, that's amazing, and we can actually see the results on the education of your children. Okay, Beth, let's look at one of the things that most parents have asked you about. What are they all about? The parents are always coming to say, I need help in this area. But what has been the most prominent feature when it comes to parents and the education of their kids?
Particularly in London, we have a lot of parents coming to us who are either fairly newly arrived from abroad, or they may have lived in this country for some time but didn't go through the education system themselves, and they just don't know how it works. It's very complicated. Your child might start at 2 or 3 or 4. They might have to do an exam if it's an independent school. They might not. You might have to put their name down at birth for some schools, not for others. Some children move on at 7, some move on at 11, some at 13. Whether you want to apply to independent schools or state schools or both, there's various different ways of doing it. And sometimes parents just get totally lost. So they come to us for generally explanations.
One of the most important things I've noticed with parents is that they forget the deadlines when it comes to applications, or they have no clue at all that it's a deadline, and they're wondering, how did my child miss this? And one of the things we've stressed on this program is it's not about how intelligent your child is, but how well prepared you, the parent, are, to pursue the best and the best opportunities for the child. Now, how important is that, for the parent understanding when it comes to deadlines for applications in choosing schools for the child?
It's pretty vital. For example, as I said, at some schools you more or less have to go straight from the delivery room to put your name down. Other ones you can wait a bit longer. Yes. Some of the small London schools that take children, the first come, first served, they can get booked up really fast. And of course, if you're going for a state school, there are specific dates when you have to fill in the form. And if you don't do it at the right time, you're a late applicant and you go to the back of the queue behind everybody else that did fill it in at the right time. So not only deciding which schools to apply to, but knowing when you've got to do it is absolutely vital.
It's quite interesting from the delivery room, because a lot of parents just think, what, I have a lot of time to wait before making my choices, and applying a year ahead is early enough. So that is very late a year ahead.
For some schools it's much too late. For other schools it's fine. You just have to know, you have to look at each school website and find out when their deadlines are. And you also, if you're going for a state school, you'll be applying through the local authority. So again, you have to look at their website and check when you have to do what.
Now, what will be your focus at the show tomorrow, at the London Guide Show? I can see you're focusing on state schools, and your guide is actually being launched today.
We have just brought out for the first time 2 London guides. Previously, we've just had 1 guide for the entire country, but so much of the schools now that we cover are in London. We thought we'd bring out guides so that London parents can actually carry them. Our big guide is roughly that sort of size, very hard. You're not going to put it in your pocket. So these ones are much smaller. And there's a much greater focus on state schools in them, partly because London state schools are very good compared with the rest of the country, which people tend to find very surprising. And it's partly because over some time there was a thing called the London Challenge, which focused on helping schools that weren't performing very well get better. And it was very successful indeed, so that even in some of the poorest boroughs, there are some very good schools. And State schools are still a minority in our London guides, but we've also done a run round all the boroughs mentioning the ones that people should look at that we haven't had time to visit ourselves.
Quite interesting, you know, Dr. Chris. I mean, one of the things you do is that you specialise in raising the standard of education in inner city schools and then looking at London. Now, Beth is telling us that some of the state schools in London are very good indeed. Most parents, once you talk about a state school in London, they say, no, I'm not sending my child there.
Yeah, it's a shame because that's more of reputation than reality, because a lot of schools that were poor performing 10 years ago have turned the corner, either because they became academies and became very independent of local authority, or they changed the leadership and had a very radical approach to learning, or had a stricter head teacher that believes discipline comes first before everything. So there are a lot of things that are happening with the schools. So if we wait and we just rely on the information of yesteryears, we are going to be in real trouble. The best thing for any parents to do is to make sure that you visit the website, look at the current GCSE results, look at the A-level results, look at the destination of the students before you make your mind up and say, no, that's the school I want to go, or that's the school I don't want to go. If your choice is based on stale information, you'll mislead yourself and mislead your child.
Beth, even looking at London schools, there are still shortage of spaces and places in London schools.
Yes.
Now, what will be your response to that?
Well, I think the problem is, in London, as everywhere else, local authorities are in charge of providing enough places, but actually they're not allowed to open any new schools. And the government seems to be depending on people coming up and opening free schools. And of course, if you wait till a group of people come along and say, I'd like to open a school, they're not necessarily going to do it in the places where schools are most needed. So I think there's a much greater overall strategy is vital to look at the places where schools are most needed and open them. And if you're going to make local authorities responsible for providing places, then you've got to give them the power to actually open new schools.
What do you think, Dr. Chris? Do you think the bureaucracy around local authorities should be relaxed a bit so that they can open new schools?
That's one. Then two, I think voluntary agencies like churches, I mean, one of the top state schools we had for a very long time were all faith-based. If the churches and third sector or community-based organizations can come in and say, look, we want to be able to contribute to the society. So because they're doing it altruistically, they will not go through the hoops that anybody will go through if you are doing it for commercial reasons or if you're doing it as a government. Because the government always looks at policy, and before policy is implemented, you have to go through a whole red tape, and that really wastes time. If we're really keen on the future of our children, I believe the current generation of religious leaders, church organizations, charities should really be at the forefront of it, because the government will never ever have a genuine interest in the education of the children. They just have a passing political interest to make sure that they, if you like, they win their seat the next election. They're not keen on that long term. So churches and organizations that have very, very long term views of things should be inputting into it. Start a school. I mean, they already have the congregation. They probably already have Sunday schools that they're running. Why can't you extend that to a full day school or run a regular school? I think that's a huge opportunity. It's part of the government is a challenge, but for the churches, it's a great opportunity for organizations to step into school ownership now and running schools.
Beth, you have a genuine interest in the education of children, and your organization has been doing this for over 30 years. Now, if you were to give a parent just one advice, what would that advice be?
When you're thinking of a school for your child, always go and visit it before you take all the rumours and gossip that's going round, because it may be a perfect school for your child but not a perfect school for your neighbour's child. So always go and visit, listen to the head, talk to other parents and make up your own mind.
Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Chris. Well, viewers, remember, if you're a parent out there, there are so many decisions and so many things to consider when making a choice for the school your child is meant to go into. And what you can do is that you go to the Good Schools Guide and get more information about that. There's a lot of information to look at when deciding what school to send your child to. We'll be taking a break now, and we'll be right back.
changing your life today. You're watching Love World, building a happier world, sharing the word of God. Yeah, yeah. You will never be the same. You are so blessed for watching Love World today.
It's fun, it's new, it's exciting, and it's what you have been waiting for. The all-new Love World TV mobile app is now out. It's the world at your fingertips.
With amazing discoveries just one touch away.
It's television made easy.
Watch your favorite programs on the go. From news, current affairs, discussions, and interactive programs.
With the Love World TV mobile app, you can report live news from on-site locations, wherever and whenever, by uploading your photos and news on the iReporter.
Share your victory stories on iTestify.
Receive the latest Pastor Chris live posts on the go.
Send shout-outs to a loved one.
Get up-to-date news.
You can also make your partnership contributions on the app.
And a whole lot more. So what are you waiting for? Get your app today.
Now available on Google Play Store and the Apple App Store.
Love World TV Mobile. Get it, explore it, share it.
Welcome back to Education Talk, and today we're looking at parents. One of the things we do is that we bring solutions to students, parents, head teachers and policymakers when it comes to education. But we're concentrating on parents, and Dr. Chris is back with me in the studio. Dr. Chris, you're welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Beth was here, the editor of the Good Schools Guide, and one of the things she said is for some schools, you literally need to start preparing for the child's education right from the delivery room. But what I'll be asking you is which months of the year are the most vital when it comes to education and deadlines?
If you have a year 5 student right now, the best months that you're going to have a lot of information coming out and visit the website will be months of May, June and July. Because if you don't visit them within these 3 months, what happens is that if you go over to the holiday, then you'll find out that the forms should have been in before the end of the academic year. So if you're keen on the top schools, because if you want middle ranking or low performing schools, the math is not as much. But if you're keen on the top schools, you must go to their website in May. And by the way, we even have a conference, a special community parents seminar coming up on the 29th of November. So if you're free, then click on the website and come to the Excellence in Education website. We'll give you much more about that. If you are in year 11, transiting to year 13, then it'll be the months of October, really late September, October and November. If you miss it on that, as far as that window of opportunity is concerned, the next will be post-Easter. This time, it will be late entry, so you want to avoid late entry. If you're looking at a top university, you must be seriously considering the month of October as well. So if you're year 13, year 12, year 13, you're looking at the month of October. If you're year 11, you're looking at the months of September, October, and November. If you're year 5, progressing to year 7, then you're looking at the months of May, June, and July. So mark those days on your calendar. It depends on the year the child is in, and again, it may also depend on your preferences. If you're looking at independent schools, then the best time for you to do it, for instance, apart from attending the independent schools where you see a lot of the prospectus is being given to you, January is when they now have to write the exam. And you're supposed to have applied either in November or the seminar?
I think they'll need to come to the seminar because there's quite a lot of information to give out. But one of the things you do regularly from time to time is the webinar. And you really had one on Wednesday. Tell us some of the tips on that webinar that parents can actually take home with.
Is understanding why they assess students in order for them to go to certain schools. If a school has oversubscription, it is fundamental that the admission is transparent and is based on merit. So what would you do? You now set a set of questions for them. Now the schools are not supposed to test content, they're supposed to test aptitude. So instead of asking you questions on science and geography, history, they don't. They ask you questions that has to do with rational thinking. They ask you logic questions. They ask you what in year 5 would be called non-verbal reasoning and verbal reasoning. In year 13, what will be called aptitude tests like psychometric tests, or ask you things like quantitative reasoning. So if you know that you want your son or your daughter to go to a top school, remember there's going to be competition. And because there's competition, there's going to be weeding. And the only way they can weed is set exams or tests or assessment for the students.
So for parents who can't go to the seminar, they can actually attend the webinar.
Yeah, they should attend the webinar because you want to know which exam is my son or daughter going to be assessed in.
And when is the next webinar?
The 29th of November is going to be both a seminar as well
and
as
a webinar as well.
So people that cannot physically travel down to Integrity Auditorium Enrichment Center in E8 can log into the Integrity website and follow proceedings, because everything is going to be, as the slides are advancing, you are going to be seeing the slides and be hearing the voice as well, and seeing faces.
And seeing faces. So they just need to log on to the Excellence in Education website to get more information.
That's right, that's correct.
Well, thousands of preschools in China are to adopt an early learning program developed in Northern Ireland. Early Years, an organization that works with young children, will train staff in thousands of institutions. Now, Dr. Chris, the question is, if China is adopting the education system in our country, why aren't our children making the same grades and even higher grades than those in China?
Wonderful. It tells us here that material is not what makes the man. If you have a good material, a good set of textbook, it's not going to read itself, one. So you have to know that there is a technique in terms of using those materials to achieve the results. If not, people will just go buy a good textbook, come with the receipt and get a grade. You can't do that. You have to still work through the books or work through the materials or get a DVD. Number two, the Chinese government is extremely aggressive in trying to out-compete, out-educate every other nation in the world. They have a clear mandate.
Isn't our government aggressive enough?
No, they're not quite as aggressive as the Chinese, because the Chinese has sensed an opportunity for global dominance, and they know that if you're going to dominate any sphere of human endeavor, you've got to be knowledgeable, you've got to be trained, you've got to be skilled. And they will not compromise on that. The third factor is the fact that the Chinese still has a mono-child law. That means you have only one child. If you have only one child, what tends to happen is that you invest a lot in that child. You know you don't have a second chance. In the West, we still have the average family is about 2.5. So if you miss out with the first one, you think you can get it with the second one.
But two isn't a lot. I think in the West, we can actually concentrate on both children and give them the best.
I know, it's delusion. It's delusionary for you to say that you can afford to lose one and gain one. The best thing for you to do is that you should have the fundamental belief that every child is a genius. I mean, if you lose out on any child, you're losing out on someone that could have discovered the next penicillin, somebody that will have discovered the next Ebola immunization technique, somebody that will have found out how best to have more environmentally friendly cars. So if you know that in every child, in every human being, there is a discovery that you have to make, there's a calling on your life. You have to be able to you have to be able to refine what has been deposited in you by the Almighty, and therefore express it for your community and for your generation. Then you will not think of second fiddle for your child. You want your child to be right at the front of things, and that's where the Chinese are literally overtaking the rest of the world when it comes to education.
Let's look at this award. Now, it's an award from the Rich Society. It's a recognition award. Now, tell us what the Rich Society is about and why this award.
The Rich Society is very, very keen in trying to find out the educational disparity and how that affects the ultimate life outcomes. So they know that if you lay a strong foundation, particularly for kids that have always been betrayed by their society or let down by their community, the inner city kids that they've always looked at, there's a sector of our community that we are ignoring, either because of poor parenting or because of poor family background or because of questionable facilities that nobody really cares for. And Rich Society runs a couple of seminars every year, opportunities for scholarships to go and study at university without having to pay any fees. So they're trying to encourage as much as possible responsible citizenship, and they've done very well. Lord Osley is a member of the House of Lords. He's one of the patrons, and he puts in a lot of effort into trying to say, don't let your immediate environment define your future. You can change your future by changing your education, by changing your skill acquisition, or by knowing that there's a lot more in you than anyone can see.
Don't let your immediate environment define your future. And with that statement, we'll be rounding up this program. Thank you so much, Dr. Chris, for coming on this program, and we look forward to having you again.
Thank you.
Anytime. Viewers, this is Education Talk. Now, if you need more information, you can send emails to educationtalk@loveworldtv.co.uk. For parents out there who are wondering, what school should I choose for my child? You can go to the Good Schools Guide and get more information. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of our programs.